Plataforma de información musical y radio online. Rutas Alternas. Escucha.
Dave Rowntree debuta como solista con el disco Radio Songs, un repaso por varios de los momentos que han formado a Dave personal y profesionalmente, pero qué mejor que poder conversar directamente en esta videollamada con el gran artista Dave Rowntree. Hola Dave.
Hello.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm very good, thank you. Very good.
Great. Where are you right now?
I'm in my studio at home. I live in about an hour outside London.
Okay. So Dave, I found a lot of maybe biographical things in radio songs, starting with the story with your father building this radio receiver. What can you tell us about that? Because it's very cool to listen radio from all over the world.
Yeah, my father was a radio engineer in the Air Force when he was a young man, and he passed his love of radio and electronics on to me, and so we used to on a Saturday morning where some fathers and sons might go to football matches or go fishing, he and I would sit round the kitchen table with soldering irons, building radios out of electronic components and then plugging them into an antenna we had in the back garden and then tuning them into stations from around the world. So yeah, it was a lovely thing to do and something I still do today.
I think it's great that you are a radio lover, because I am a radio lover too. And it's great to find new sounds, new music, and a voice that it's your companion during so many moments of your life.
Yeah, it's an interesting, my first love is radio technology rather than pop radio, which I've always found quite frustrating because, I'm far more interested in playing the songs I want to play rather than playing the ones the DJ wants to play me. But, radio, the number of radios here, at least, the stations are getting far smaller and far more specialist. And so actually I'm finding that suits me rather better. There's a radio station here that just plays new music, which is great, so the kind of purpose of radio is changing, certainly in the UK.
But there are people that it's still very important to the story of radio in the UK, like I figure John Peel, Lauren Laverne. I mean, there have been all over this time radio personalities that give you that voice, that give you that sounds that you want to find. Yes.
As I say, I've always found listening to pop radio quite frustrating because in between, every 10th record is a good one and all the rest is absolute rubbish. It's kind of like listening to the charts, isn't it? The charts are always usually 90% rubbish with a few kind of good records dotted in and around them. So, but the more specialist radio gets, the more interesting it is for me. And especially when it comes to finding new music, something I always am keen to do and always need to do for my various projects. And so Six Music over here is a station that by and large just plays new artists and new music, alternative music, kind of the non-mainstream music. And, that's where I found my natural home, really, I think.
Yes, there's always a station in every city, every capital of the world that gives you that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a matter of finding them.
So Dave, and other part of your debut album, Radio Songs, is your vision about moving from your hometown to London and starting your career that I figure it was crazy in the late 80s, in the 90s. How much of that moments are in Radio Songs?
It's not really about that at all. I don't know why you got that impression, unfortunately. It's more about my time growing up, really, as a youngster. I grew up in a small town in kind of 100 miles away from London, in a housing estate in a kind of in a very depressed, bleak time in the UK. you know, and my family life was not a happy one. We weren't a happy household. So, but radio was one of the things that got me through all of that. You know, radio kind of gave me listening to different perspectives from around the world was kind of my political awakening, really, and listening to different stations and music and languages from around the world gave me a sort of taste for adventure and a kind of a reason to leave my hometown, really. That was the kind of beginning of that. So yeah, it's more about the kind of the England I grew up in the 1970s, and the kind of what a bleak place it was, and kind of the parallels that England today has. We were again a kind of a bleak place, managed to cut ourselves off for no reason I can imagine from the rest of the world. You know, the politics is changing, the far right are on the rise. You know, the economy has just collapsed, just for no good reason other than the politicians were incompetent. You know, and all of this stuff that I remember going on in the 1970s, which is the reason I hated the country at the time, is now happening again. You know, so it's really about that. It's certainly nothing to do with Blur, nothing to do with moving to London, nothing to do with, you know, the 90s, really.
Okay. So, Dave, as you said, the UK have changed a lot over these 40, 50 years, not necessarily for good, but there are some things important for the British society, right?
Yeah, that everything isn't bleak. You know, the music now is as good as it's ever been, though I think it usually is. But I think the music that's been made now is the very, very best pop music that anybody has ever made. It's one of the most exciting times in music that I can remember, and not just because my album's out. Other people are making good music as well.
No. Your album is amazing, Dave. I get very excited when I first noticed that you are gonna release an album, because you are a very interesting person.
Thank you. That's very kind of you
You
to
are
say.
so diverse, podcaster, in politics, in radio. I mean, it's great to find a person so who wants more, who never is never enough with the things you had around you.
Yeah. No, I'm definitely always looking for new ideas, new adventures. That's absolutely true. So yes, but it's I guess the fact that there are some good things coming out of the situation we find ourselves in the UK now doesn't mean that the situation we find ourselves in isn't miserable and dire. And we've taken a huge backward step in leaving the EU, and that's having all of these knock-on consequences that everybody's trying to pretend are nothing to do with leaving the EU. You know, the weakness of the economy. Supermarket shelves are empty at the moment. There's no fresh fruit and vegetables on them. You walk in the supermarket, it's like, where's all the stuff? You know, all of this is to do with leaving the EU. We're all trying to pretend it's not. We're all trying to pretend it's something to do with some bad weather in France or something, or somebody else has done something over there. No, it's because we left the EU.
I know it's been hard, the life post Brexit in the UK.
Yeah. And we've taken a permanent kind of 5% hit on the economy, which means we've been bordering on or in recession ever since. And of course other bad things have happened. There's been coronavirus and other factors. The war in Ukraine. All of these have had an influence, absolutely. But almost all other European countries have weathered these storms and still managed to get some growth in their economy and still managed to put food on their supermarket shelves, except us.
I know. And for the music, Dave, how was the impact of Brexit for musicians?
Oh, very, very bad. Very bad. We told the government before Brexit, or before, after the Brexit vote, but before the deal had been done, what the UK music industry needed in order to be able to carry on. And the government said, don't worry, we understand. It's not only going to be just the same as it was before, it's going to be better. So we went, all right, well, that's good, better. We'll definitely have some better. Not only was it not better, they did nothing absolutely nothing to help UK musicians at all, or indeed to help European musicians that wanted to play in the UK. It just severed links entirely with, so now we're in this weird situation where, the UK industry used to rely on the fact that there's a potential 500 million person audience in the EU, as opposed to the kind of 50 million audience in the UK. And now we're in this kind of weird situation where you may or may not need a visa or, a carnet or your different kind of van, or you may or may not have to go back to the UK after doing a certain number of gigs and then drive back out again. There's a permanent up to 3-day queue for the Channel Tunnel now to get into Calais. All of this stuff, just completely cut off the ability of UK-based musicians to make a living. The people at the bottom end, bands like Blur will always be fine, but it's the new bands, the struggling artists trying to break through, trying to give up the day job and do it for a living are the ones that are suffering. Without those, in 10 years' time, there is no music industry. Blur aren't still going to be here in 10, 20 years. We're all going to be living in old people's homes. We're not going to be out on tour. Who's going to be headlining Glastonbury in 20 years? If the new bands coming through today aren't able to make a living, aren't able to give up the day job, and aren't able to put in the all day, everyday work you need to do in order to build your career as a professional musician. So it's a disaster, an absolute disaster.
Yes, terrible, because as you said, one of the identities of British music is that you guys always keep going, generating new artists, making new bands, new headliners for festivals, and it's hard to think that that may end.
Yeah,
Terrible.
it is. There was no reason for it. That was the most frustrating thing. The EU was very willing to do a deal to make sure that artists could carry on touring there. And in fact, when the UK government just refused to do that, many countries very kindly said, well, don't worry about it, you just come along anyway. That was, France did, Spain did, and very, very grateful for that. The reality is they could change their minds at any time. These are voluntary arrangements that those countries have entered into. And the arrangements are different in each European country. The paperwork is different. The requirements are different. Even to the point out that the kind of van that UK touring musicians at a kind of low level use to do the touring in is not legal now in the EU. It's a special kind of arrangement where you have the band in the front and the equipment in the back. That's not the legal way to do it in the EU, but we were allowed because we were members of the EU, and what was legal in one country is legal in all countries. Now we've left. Now that isn't legal again. Everyone's having to buy new vans. Who can afford to do that?
But
It's chaos.
I know, it's impossible.
Absolute chaos.
Yes, terrible. Is there any hope, Dave?
Yeah, all of this is fixable. It takes the political will to do the fixing.
Because
I don't think
politicians come and go, right?
Yeah. Well, this lot are hopefully going. There's a big election next year. Hopefully, this lot will be gone. We'll get some new politicians in who are more interested in the creative industries, more interested in doing a sane deal with our European neighbours that kind of allows musicians to make a living.
Of course. Dave, you released radio songs a few weeks away, and you present the album in Rutas East, in a very cool place, one of the most exciting record shops in the world, maybe. You've been there. How was that experience?
Oh, it's great. I've done 4 shows. I did 3 sort of warm-up shows to put a band together and make sure it was going to work, and that ended up at the Amira in London, a small club. That was a lot of fun. And then I did, on the album release day, I played Rough Trade East, which is an iconic record shop, and So it's such an enormous history of bands playing there. Everybody you can think of has played there. You know, it's great to be part of that heritage, really. So it's very exciting. All went very well. I really enjoyed it. So I love that. Playing live is what I enjoy doing the most, really, out of being in a band. So that's the thing. That's one of the points of the album, was to give me the ability to play live when I wanted to, and not just when, you know, the other three malcontents in my other bigger project decide that they also want to.
And how was for you be a frontman?
Pardon?
How was for you to be a frontman?
Oh, I enjoyed it. Yeah, I've done a lot of public speaking in my role as a politician and as a lawyer. So, you know, standing up in front of a crowd doesn't scare me. I enjoyed it. It's fun to play. It's fun to be the focus of attention. You know, who wouldn't like that?
Dave, Read the Songs was produced by Leo Abrahams. How was working with him?
Oh yes, oh yeah, he's great. Yeah, really, really interesting guy. Really fun to work with. Really brilliant musician. Really fantastic producer. So yeah, he was great.
Amazing. Finally, when will you come to Mexico?
Yeah. Oh, hopefully we'll go this year. I can't promise anything, but Blur is on tour this year, and so I'm hopeful that come this autumn we can do what we usually do and come to Mexico and to South America. That's what I want to happen. That's what I'm pushing for. So wish me luck.
I wish you luck.
If I push hard enough, then,
of course,
you'll see us in the autumn. I can't promise anything.
See you soon here in Mexico, Dave. In the meantime, congratulations.
So.
Congratulations on the album. Sounds amazing. It was great to listen to your debut album. Dave Rowntree, thank you so much for the chat with Rutas Alternas.
My pleasure.
Plataforma de información musical y radio online. Rutas Alternas. Escucha.